Chapter 8 St. Bethany Day 3. Another shitty night with enough flashbacks to produce a bloody film, plus my head was still mulling over the plans for today. A quick check of Mickey informed me that it was only 4 o'clock, might as well get up, becoming bored with all this tossing and turning. Dragged my sorry arse in the bathroom for the morning 3 S's, shit, shave and shampoo before getting dressed into jogging bottoms and a light sweat top. Remember that I still hadn't checked out the route through the forest towards the port where the road takes several turns on itself. If I'm quick, should manage to complete this before breakfast. Removed multi-tool from under the pillow, placed it in the pocket of joggers. Even at this daft hour, I remembered to remove my tripwire before opening the door and stepping out into the corridor. By the sound of it, few doors down someone was still hunting for truffles as they slept. Decided a deaf person was staying in the last room as a woman was shouting at the top of her voice, "I'm coming." Wonder where they are going at this time of the morning? The same situation as the other night with nobody behind the front desk. A check confirmed the man was once again sleeping in the back office. Let's hope he is still on tonight as well before we bug out. Exited the building, turned right heading up the high street until I came to the junction in the road. It was still dark, so the street was illuminated with several lights which gave off a faint glow. Needed to confirm the timing from here to the spot where I'd walked to before. This time it had to be accurate. A quick check of my wristwatch and set off at a fast pace until I came to the edge of the forest. Took a look at Mickey, who verified it had only taken me 15 minutes. Was starting to become light, which should make trying to find a way through a lot easier. Located the track I spotted the other day and headed off into the woods. The trail continued for about 100 meters before turning right through some bushes that had overgrown the path. We'll probably be moving through here fast, so spend a little time ensuring they would move when required. Didn't want to move them now as it would confirm someone had come this way, plus they would need to fall back into place once we had passed. Followed the path for another kilometer click before coming to a wide junction. This idiot had forgotten to bring the map, so would need to go by my acute sense of direction. Decided the right fork would be the best option, so bordering the track leading off to the right. Found a small sapling and bent it near the bottom, making sure the longest part pointed the right way. Grabbed a handful of dirt, rubbing it into the newly exposed clean cut on the arch, making sure it was not visible to anyone coming this way. Carried out the same process on every junction I discovered on the route, until I reached the far end of the forest and met up with the road again. For people who know what they're looking for, this is the best way to mark a trail. Most people don't acknowledge what's staring them in the face. Anything happened to me, Simon and George would find their way without me. Time was getting on, so headed back the way I had come, this time making a mental note of any good ambush points along the route, working on the principle that if I would make one in a particular position, a good chance this is where someone else would make one. Would mark these down on the map once back at the hotel. Arrived back with about 15 minutes until breakfast, time for a quick wash and change before meeting the other two. Both were seated in the restaurant when I entered, sat at a table to the rear.
Morning, Sleeping Beauty. Glad you could join us.
Second word is off, George. Pass the coffee. Simon poured me a brew and I filled the boys in on my morning activities. Any of you sampled the delights of the continental/American breakfast yet?
Wouldn't like to start without you.
Don't know about you, but I'm bloody starving. Anyone coming up to grab some brekkie? Same rubbish as yesterday, but hey, food is food. Loaded the plate with one of everything. This was maybe going to be the last proper meal for a while. Sat back down and poured yet another coffee. Guess the waiter is getting to know me as he had left the pot instead of keeping coming back. Think you left space on your plate, George?
Know what you can do, Steve.
As usual, Simon returned with a few offerings of rabbit food. How the hell do you survive on such little food?
Practice, mate.
Who's up for a bit of a stroll after breakfast? Don't worry, Tanky. It will only be a short walk. We need to discuss the plans on how we're getting to and from St. Hal.
Okay by me. Steve, could do with stretching the legs. Need to wait for Simon to finish his lettuce leaf.
No, just a place where we can talk without the chance of anyone eavesdropping on our conversation. Exited the hotel and turned right up to the junction in the road, and turned left. Was heading for the open ground I had seen the other day on the way to the port. Usual practice on this type of operation, something we had learned over time. Nothing was discussed about the plan on the route. Doesn't matter how good you think you are, it is always possible for someone to overhear your conversation. Right, gents, the open ground I'm heading for is about 100 meters from here. Simon, if you take a right here and making your way around from the right and stand off until you see me and George approach. Spot anything out of the ordinary, give me a missed call, 1 ring, 2 rings if the target area then becomes clear. George and I will stay at the end of the building until we are confident there is nobody around. Didn't expect any issues, but better to be safe than sorry, especially with Edward's connections, and still not too sure about the 2 men that kept appearing at the hotel. Clear from my point, George, you see anything?
Apart from the group of men over in the doorway, it appears to be fine to me.
Okay, let us proceed to the mound and meet Simon. Was about to move when a missed call came over the phone, 1 ring. Fuck, what's the issue? Let's stand off for a while, George. I can't see anything, can you?
No, mate.
About 5 minutes later when I received another missed call, this time 2 rings. Okay, let's go. What was the problem, Simon?
Nothing much. 2 men were hanging around over in that derelict building, but they've gone now.
Right down to business. Here's what's been done to date since arriving Thursday morning. Firstly, I purchased the rest of the stuff we need for the mission, such as gas bottles, clay, and nails for the homemade claymores. We will not assemble them until we reach Abby and Sam's place on St. Halb. Talking of Abby, Sam, can you give them a call this morning, Simon, to let them know we will be arriving 1 hour after first light on Monday? We will update them on where later today after we talk with Derek. Second, leaving St. Halb. Plan, acquired return flights via the seaplane returning, a week Friday at 12 o'clock, so we need to aim to complete the mission by then. Plan B, we will arrange Derek to pick us along the coast, more than likely from the creek we talked about before we left.
Got a plan C, Steve?
Yes, Simon. Don't fuck up plan A or B. Let us talk more about this once we're on St. Halb, when we have a better idea of the layout of the island. May need to go to the shopping center on the outskirts of town if you need anything for our Poochie friends. George.
No problem. Give us the number of the taxi you use. We'll nip off once we've finished here.
For tonight, gents, our normal safety precautions will come into force. Come to my room later and collect the sheets I acquired the other night, plus the disposable overalls, gloves, etc. We'll go and purchase 3 more mobiles and SIM cards from several shops around the town. Planning to play it safe and throw the phones over the side of the boat, somewhere after leaving St. Bethany. Can't be too safe in this type of situation. Anybody could have cloned our phones or installed a tracker. Around midnight, we'll bug out. Simon, you collect the copies of our passports from behind reception. I will deal with the lights in the rear yard, the one I prepared the other day. George, if you ensure the security guard stays asleep and doesn't watch us leave. Once we are at the back of the hotel, we will exit through the hole in the back fence, turn left until we reach the junction at the inn, take the road we just came down. The rendezvous point if something goes wrong, will be where this road enters the forest. I will prepare an RV once I have the phones. Any questions, gents? Okay, let us RV at Derek's place. Shall we say 1500 hours? Once our conversation was over, George and I headed back in the direction of the hotel. Simon stayed behind to make his phone calls to Abby and Sam, along with making the first contact with Katie over on St. Halb regarding the weapons and other stuff we are going to need for the mission. After making sure nobody was near him, Simon dialed his first contact, Sam.
Is that Mr. Peeps? It's Simon.
A code word given to Simon by Henry before we left the UK. If the reply was sorry Mr. Peeps is out at the moment, this meant Simon was talking to either Abby or Sam, but this was not a good time to speak due to their location on the island, probably at Henry's place. If the reply was, yes this is Mr. and Mrs. Peeps, it was okay to continue with the conversation as this was them. The response Simon was hoping for came back, yes this is Mr. and Mrs. Peeps, thank fuck for that.
Hi, Sam, it's Simon. We will be landing in St. Halb about an hour and a half after first light on Monday morning. I can give you a better idea of time and location when we depart St. Bethany.
No problem, Simon. Would you like me to pick you up or leave the Land Rover somewhere?
Picking us up, Sam, would be perfect, as we will need to go to meet Katie in Jal as well to collect up some supplies.
Okay, Simon, no issues. We'll be on standby from first light. Let me know when you're close. This isn't a large island, so won't take long to get to any location.
Probably need your assistance for most of the day, plus would be great if we could meet with Abby at some point to give us a rundown of the property. Any chance you could obtain a detailed plan of Henry's place as well? That would be fantastic.
Leave it all with me, Simon.
Simon ended the call with Sam before finding the number for Katie and Zhao. Henry had also provided a code word for this first contact as well. Let's hope the codes had not been compromised. The code for Katie was, "Hi, is that Katie from Perth?" If she replies, "No, this is Katie from Headland," we knew we were talking to Katie. Took several attempts before someone answered the phone.
Hi, is that Katie from Perth?
No, this is Katie from Headland.
Fantastic. This is Simon, a friend of Henry who owns the property on the north of the island.
Been waiting for you to get in contact. Henry said you would be calling.
Did he tell you what we would need from you?
Yes, Simon, I'll make sure everything is ready for when you arrive. When will that be?
Better play it safe and not give away too much info on our movements, Simon thought to himself.
Sometime on Tuesday. Besides the weapons, we will also need around 20 electrical detonators. Can you help with this?
Shouldn't be an issue as I have contacts with a small quarry company. We'll arrange for them to be here ready for our meeting.
Thanks, Katie, see you Tuesday.
Simon finishes all his calls, for now, so heads back to the hotel to wait for the other two nutters. Meantime, both George and I made our way back to the hotel.
Steve, have you the number for your taxi driver, chum?
You have the memory of a sieve. I gave this to you earlier, so not giving it to you again. Ask the person behind the desk to call Edward. They will know who you're talking about. That bugger knows everyone. George walked over to reception.
Excuse me, sir, could you give Edward, the taxi driver, a call and ask him to collect me up in about half an hour?
What name should I give, sir?
George, a friend of Steve.
Edward must have been local as he turned up in around 20 minutes.
George, Edward's outside.
Okay, mate, catch you later.
Where to, George?
Came the voice from the front of the cab.
Having a problem sleeping, Edward, do you know where it is possible to purchase some strong medication?
Yes, sure, my friend owns a pharmacy in the shopping center.
Steve said you knew everyone.
Edward laughed.
You know Steve Long. Bet you're looking forward to the fishing trip.
Yes, for about 5 years now. As for the fishing, not a great fan, but the other two are. And hey, the journey comes with beer, so I'll be fine.
The taxi pulled up outside the shopping center.
George, if you go inside, turn left, proceed to the end and the pharmacy is on the right. Tell them Edward brought you here.
Thanks, Edward. Going to be some time. You might as well go and shall we say come back to collect me in a couple of hours. Going to look around the place for a while.
No problem, George, we'll be back for you in 2 hours. I'll be parked here.
Thanks, Edward. See you then.
Once inside, the place opened with a vast array of shops of all descriptions. To the right of the door was a map of all shops from which George took his bearings. George takes a gander around the place before making his way to the pharmacy to find out what sleeping drugs are going to be needed. The more reliable, the better, to knock out the dogs. Now just need a way to deliver the drugs. Infusing meat is not an option. If they are trained dogs, they will have been instructed not to pick up any food they find. So, a different way is going to be required. George spots a sport hunting shop in the window, where several types of spearfishing equipment. Now that would be perfect as a last resort, saying that if it came to that might as well shoot the little fuckers. Out of the corner of his eye, George spotted a sign reading poisons for getting rid of your pests, behind the counter. Bingo, that should do the job. A bit of luck, they would not ask too many questions when a stranger tries to buy poison. Would say Edward recommended the shop worth a try. Behind the counter was a young man dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, lost in his own world as music blasted from his headphones. Just the type of person required for this purchase, as the man gave the impression he would not care who the fuck he was selling poison to as long as he received his paycheck at the end of the week. Took several attempts to attract the man's attention. All it took was reaching over and tapping him lightly on the shoulder. The fucker almost jumped out of his skin as he was suddenly brought back to here and now.
Sorry to disturb you in the music, but Edward sent me here. I seem to have a pest problem that needs dealing with,
says George, standing at the counter.
No problem, man. How big is your problem?
As he reached under the counter and produced several tins marked with caution, poisons, hazardous to health.
Huge, a pack of wild dogs taking the piss around my mate's property and killing the chickens.
Then you will need this one, mate. You can lay your traps with this net or add water and leave it for them to drink.
That one it is. I'll take 2 cans.
Perfect. $30 per tin if you're paying by card, or $20 if you're using cash and don't need a receipt.
Cash it is then. The bugger was probably going to rip his boss off, but not our problem. Do me a favor, mate. Put them in a bag.
Right, pooch is sorted, George says to himself. Now for our sleepy security guard. The pharmacy would be the best place for this. The pharmacy was a completely different place than the sporting shop. The staff were dressed in white clinical coats, complete with shiny name badges.
Hi, Amy.
She had a name tag. Might as well be polite and use her name.
The taxi driver, Edward, said this would be the perfect place to help me with my problem.
Sure, what's the issue?
Nothing much. Having difficulty sleeping. Do you have some powerful sleeping tablets?
Must be your lucky day. These arrived this morning and are brand new on the market. They should allow you to sleep for hours.
Thanks. Can I have 2 packets, please?
Sure, but being drugs, I will need your name plus the details of where you're staying for the records.
No problem. My name is George James. I'm at the Grace Hotel.
Well, it's almost accurate, as we don't want someone tracing the drugged-up security guard to us. With all the purchases completed, now, might as well grab a coffee and wait for Edward to come back, decides George. It shouldn't be long. True to his word, Edward was back smack on time.
Ready, George?
Yes, Edward. Can you take me back to the hotel? You can take the longer scenic way if you like. Would love to see a little of the beautiful island.
Of course, this wasn't true. George just wanted to vary the journey around the island, keeping people on their toes. The journey took them along the harbor past the shed we had stored our friend in. Wonder if he was still there. Not detected any explosion from the trap we had left, so guess he is still sitting tight. Guided tour with running commentary from Edward completed. George arrives back at the hotel.
Thanks, Edward. Enjoyed the trip. Here's the fare plus a $20 tip.
As George enters the hotel, he hears the routine verbal abuse coming from Simon, who was sitting at a small table not too far away from the bar.
Stand by your beds, the cold stream guards have arrived.
Nice to see you too, Simon. Now get the beers in, I'm parched.
How was your shopping? Purchase everything you wanted?
Simon and George were old hands at this and knew people were listening on purpose or being nosy bastards and not to discuss anything unless they were in a safe location.
Yes, thanks, Simon. You make contact with our friends?
Yep, all sorted. Have you seen Steve since this morning, George?
Yes, he has gone out to finish his shopping and will be back later. We might as well grab some lunch.
Sounds like we have a plan?
Purchased the last 2 of the phones, which now meant Simon and George had a spare phone for when we landed in St. Halb. Bearing in mind I had purchased them from the local phone shop goes without saying, paid with cash, so no paper trail of bank transactions. Now needed one more phone for myself once on St. Halb. Next stop, the hardware store I used the other day. Needed a short plank of wood, a small trowel and some 6-inch nails for use at the RV. That's what I love about small islands. Purchased the wood and nails with no questions asked. Soon arrived at the track as it entered the forest, with all my equipment now needed to find the right place for tonight, which needs to be off the track with easy access and cover from view. The marks I placed this morning were still in place at the Y junction, as we would be going right when we bug out. The RV needed to be close to the track. Stopped to study the area for a while, surprising how much more you observe if you take time to stop and survey rather than piling in headfirst. Spotted what should be the perfect place about 50 meters up the track on the left. The last thing I wanted to do was to leave footprints on the trail in front of the RV, so best to enter from the rear to throw off any nosy bastard who may have spotted any tracks. turned left, and made my way just inside the woods along the left fork in the track for about 50 meters. At this point, I had to cross the trail. Lucky enough, I'd learned a trick from some Jamaican soldiers who I did some training with several years back. Instead of walking across the track and leaving footprints, which any idiot could see you had crossed the path and in which direction you were traveling, the trick was to take a giant leap. Fewer marks, the better. Land on one leg, then swivel 360 degrees before taking another leap. This only leaves a small circular mark with no indication of the direction of travel. Once on the other side, stood off for a moment to select the best way forward. Again, the route had to provide cover, but also, not cause too much movement of vegetation, which could be easily seen. Would be coming here once the light had faded and was dark enough to mask our activities. To my right was an opening leading off towards where I wanted to go, with the right amount of protection. Found the perfect RV, which stood about 20 meters off the trail, the one we would be traveling down early tomorrow morning, which gave protection in all directions, including from above, plus still being able to monitor for people coming our way. The floor of the RV was covered in dead foliage, which would create noise when laid up. Spent time carefully pushing them to all sides, being careful not to pile them too high, which would be noticeable if anyone looked this way. Need to deal with the issue of protecting our way and from any intruders. Wouldn't want anyone to creep up on us. Located 2 small trees, one on either side of the small clearing I came through, planning a little something for any idiot who tried to take us by surprise. Opened my bag and took out 2 clothes pegs in which I stuck 2 drawing pins, one on either side of the inside of the open jaws. To that was attached some of my small electrical wire. One end led to a battery, the other was a longer piece which led off to one of the transmitters Simon had brought with him, and another wire led from the transmitter to the other side of the battery. Placed the components in a plastic bag to keep them waterproof, ensuring the clothes peg was left protruding, concealed this under the dead leaves on the floor. On the other side, I attached a length of fishing wire to a tree, making sure I had enough to stretch across the opening at about 6 inches from the ground. At the other end of the fishing line was attached a small piece of wood. This would sit between the jaws of the clothes peg, acting as an insulator. Once someone tripped the wire, the wood would be pulled out, causing the 2 drawing pins to come together, creating the electrical circuit for the transmitter, which in turn would send a signal to our receiver. Always good to have a backup, so on the RV side of the tripwire, I dug a hole more significant than the piece of wood purchased earlier, and about 10 inches deep. Into the plank was placed the nails, making sure they were not too close together and stood up vertically, to cause the most pain as possible. This was put into the hole. Grabbed some thin twigs, and laid them over the hole before covering them with leaves from close by, needed to look the same. Now if some smart fucker sees my tripwire and tries stepping over it, they would be getting a foot full of sharp nails for their efforts. That will teach them. The RV all set, a quick scan to ensure nothing looked blatantly obvious, hide the dirt from the hole. Wouldn't put the tripwire in place until we were in the RV. Accidents do happen. Made my way back the same way as I came until I reached the edge of the forest. A quick check of my person for dirt and foliage. Couldn't go back to the hotel looking like I had literally been dragged through a hedge backwards. Arrived back to find Simon and George still propping up the bar. Looks like you 2 lazy bastards have been busy.
Keeping the stool warm for your fat arse, mate.
Take it no issues today then, boys, and everything is set?
Yep, nothing to do for the rest of the day,
replied George, as he ordered a round of drinks from the bar. After this round, anyone fancy a meal and a few more cold ones down at Derek's place?
Brilliant idea. What about you, Simon?
Yeah, sure, you can count me in.
Derek's place it is. Couldn't be ours to wait around for Edward, so we grabbed a taxi from the taxi rank across the road.
Where would you find gentlemen like to go?
The fish restaurant, Derek's place at the port, please.
Sorry, don't know that one.
Shit. Being taken everywhere by Edward, the idea of checking the name of the joint hadn't even crossed my mind. Drop us off at the port. We can find it from there.
Okay, no problem. You tell me where you like to be dropped off when we arrive.
The taxi dropped us off at the far end of the pier, so just a 200-meter walk to Derek's place. The place was empty, apart for a small group sat at stools situated in front of the bar and seeming to be in good spirits or too many spirits in them, more like, fantastic for us as service would be quick. Only been seated at the table for a couple of minutes before Derek appeared with 3 beers.
On the house, gents, would you like to order some scran?
Yeah, can you bring over the menu? Being a Mediterranean, the 12-ounce steak was looking promising. You eating from the list, Simon, or should I go around the back and steal the rabbit's food?
Fuck off, twat. For that, I will have the steak as well.
Bet he doesn't eat much of it. Hey George. While Derek is away preparing the scran, do you think we should let him know a little more about the mission, due to the fact he could be picking us up in a gunfight if all goes arse over face?
No harm in letting him know a little more. What are your thoughts on this, George?
Okay by me. Plus, if we all agree, we should pay him a little more than a couple of hundred.
Okay, agreed. I'll call him over when George and I have finished eating.
What about me, boys?
With all respect, mate, we only have 2 weeks to get this done, and by the time you've finished eating the whole steak, the mission could be over, and we'll all be back in the UK. About 10 minutes later, the food arrived. Derek, once we've finished eating, could you join us? Want to discuss a little more about our trip in the morning.
Sure, no problem.
Now that's what I call a steak. Must have covered half the plate along with chips and rabbit food. Has everyone finished? If so, I will call Derek over.
Yep, all done here. Simon may be struggling.
Okay, call him over. Can't eat anymore.
Take it you two would like another beer while I'm getting Derek's attention?
Might as well collect a few while you're about it. Saves you going back again.
The bar being full, Derek was busy serving the gents with a mixture of alcoholic concoctions, as they had now started some sort of drinking game. When you have a moment, can you come over, Derek?
Yeah, give us a few minutes.
There, you ugly bastards. 2 beers. Drink up. Derek will be over shortly.
Sorry for the delay, gents. Had to finish serving the group at the bar. Now, how can I be of assistance?
Not a problem once Simon and George have stopped gas bagging. We can talk about why we asked you to come over. I suggest we whisper from this point. Don't want the boys over at the bar overhearing our conversation. Right, here's a quick overview of what we are doing on the island of St. Hal. Simon, George, and I are going to St. Hal to remove some people from the winery. The owner is a friend of Simon's. The people we believe to be armed and will put up a fight when we ask them warm-heartedly to leave. Now if it all goes fucking wrong, we could be doing a tactical withdrawal and a hail of bullets. Going to need you at the boat to make sure we all manage to make it the fuck out of there. Now you know that you could be picking us up under heavy fire. Are you still willing to take us and bring us back? We're prepared to increase the money we're going to give you from 200 to 5,000. To ensure you are where we need you to be.
Sure, I'm in. I have something for you.
Derek placed a bulging black bag in front of us.
Was going to give them to you tomorrow on the boat. But from what I've heard, you may have some night activities planned, and this place can be dangerous at night, especially for foreigners due to the organized underworld on the island. Already informed Steve, it's run by Edward, the taxi driver.
What the fuck, Steve? Something you forgot to mention.
Proclaims George. May have slipped my mind.
So, what time do you want to leave in the morning?
Be at your boat at first light tomorrow ready to go. We will be around and meet you at your vessel. One last thing. Can you give us a lift back in about an hour? Me and the boys have a busy night planned. Was around 2100 hours by the time we return back to the hotel. Gents, you fully understand what you have to do before we bug out at 2 o'clock? Come with me now. I will give you the sheets, overalls, and gloves I procured earlier. To confirm we will meet out in the rear yard at 2 o'clock. Check your watches. Don't want anyone being late. The boys collected the sheets and their share of the stuff I had purchased and disappeared off to their respective rooms. Put on a pair of the disposable gloves, then spread one of the new sheets on the floor and emptied the contents of several bags into the middle. Need to place them in my Bergen in such a way there was no movement, and hence noise, when we bugged out and made our way to the RV. We'll need to be up in 3 hours, so might as well grab some shut-eye. Back in George's room, he had placed the sheet on the floor, and now just needed to crush the sleeping pills and add them to some water. he decided the best and quickest way for the mixture to enter into our security guard's bloodstream was to inject them directly. The tricky part would be stopping him from waking up and making a run for it. May have to drug his coffee as well. It appears like George will be joining him for a brew until he feels drowsy, then inject him. This is the advantage of doing your groundwork, as he had spent last night with him at daft o'clock in the pretense that he needed a coffee, and everywhere was shut. The security guard fell for it hook, line and sinker, so tonight shouldn't be an issue. Need to ensure all the rubbish was taken away in the bedsheet, to be ditching at sea tomorrow. Finished packing my Bergen, better give it a few shakes and listen for any rattles. That would be the last thing we needed, and very unprofessional. The time was now 2200 hours. Set the alarm for 1 o'clock, time for some shut-eye. Managed to grab a little sleep, but now's the time to put the guard to sleep before the boys made an appearance. Time to put on the overalls, dust mask and gloves, the same as the others would be doing when they wake up. Bed stripped and remade with clean sheets, etc. Wiping down all surfaces, including the bottom of my Bergen, as that will soon be sat on the clean floor near the door. One last check to ensure nothing connected to us would be left in the room. Stood in the center of the sheets, removed my overalls, placed several wipes on floor in the direction of the door before tying up bed sheets into a bundle and putting them next to the exit along with the Bergen. George's plan was to place his Bergen outside in the rear yard before going to see our friendly guard for coffee. The light was on in the back room. Fantastic. Looked like the security guard was still awake. Turned into the room, and the guard wasn't about. Crap. This was going to be an issue if he appeared when Simon is looking for the passports. George was about to leave when the little fucker came up behind him.
Hi, George, you come for more coffee? You're in luck, about to put on a fresh pot.
Yes, please. Couldn't sleep, so came down to see if you had a brew on.
Help yourself, just need to go for a piss.
Perfect, couldn't have been planned better. George pours 1 cup and adds the sleeping powder mixture, then waits until the guard came back in the room.
Here you go, mate. Only manners to give your friends the first cup.
The truth was, he didn't want him suspecting anything with a cup already sitting on the counter for him. George hands him the brew and pours 1 for himself. Not sure how long this was going to take, so given this task 1 hour. While the guard walks over to the corner of the room to turn down the volume on the TV, he empties his cup into the sink. The last thing he needed was to be lying in an OP bursting for a piss.
That went down well. Fancy another one, mate?
Yeah, little on the dry side.
Again, George made sure he wasn't looking and poured more mixture into his coffee. Repeated this 4 times before the bugger started to drop off.
Back in a moment. Might have drunk too much coffee. Need a piss.
This was just an excuse to give him time to fall asleep before hitting him with the syringe. On the way back from the bog, George ran into Simon on his way from behind the reception.
Got the copies?
No, we have a problem. The receptionist is being a hero and is still awake in the back office. Got any of that sleeping stuff left, George?
A little.
What's required here is teamwork. You take him in a coffee and keep him busy while I collect the passport copies.
Okay, Simon, give it a few more minutes for my security guard to go night-night, and I'll grab a cup.
The drug seemed to be working. Our guard didn't make a twitch when the syringe was inserted into his arm. Now that should keep him asleep for about 8 hours. George felt sorry for him in a way, as he will be sleeping when his boss comes in the morning. And receive a right bowl locking with a bit of luck, not the sack.
Here you go, Simon. 1 coffee with milk and drugs. What more could a receptionist need?
Thanks. You go and give it to the bastard while I grab our stuff.
Once George had engaged the man in loud conversation to drown out any noise from the filing cabinets being opened and closed, Simon looked for the passports behind the reception desk. Found the buggers, and just in time, as it was now 1:50, time for the RV outside. As Simon turned to attract George's attention, George came from the back office.
The bugger is asleep now. Didn't take him long.
Probably bored to sleep by you.
Like George, Simon had placed his kit outside before collecting the passports.
Heard from Steve this morning?
No, but knowing him, he will be out in the yard already.